go straight over to international security expert, friend of the station, Will Geddes. Hi, Will.
Hey, Kev. Nice to speak to you.
Great. Thank you for giving us your time. Just give us your overview. How do you analyse what's going on now? How do you see the situation? Is this the beginning of the end for Putin?
I think it very well may be, actually, Kev. I mean, this is quite a serious operation that's going on right now. And you have a very, very capable adversary to Putin who is very unhappy with the defense minister, and that is his objective when he gets to Moscow. He wants him taken out, and in what capacity that might be, we don't know. But in terms of, obviously, the capability that he has behind him, Prigozhin has an enormous capability, and Putin has used him right across the world in various different parts to acquire huge amounts of wealth. So it's not a sort of ragtag bunch of mercenaries who are trying to do this. This has been in the planning, I would say, for quite a long time.
That's what I was going to ask you. You know about these kind of situations. Now, we're hearing that Prigozhin, he has his entire army is about 50,000, but he's actually marching with about 25,000. They seem to be progressing with extraordinary speed, great rapidity, and the only way that could happen, unopposed, basically, we've seen one or two explosions, but they seem to be marching through Russia towards Moscow at a hell of a rate, and the only way that could happen is with some kind of collusion between Prigozhin and someone at the Kremlin. Would you feel that's the situation?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think there is certainly those that are actually within the ministries and certainly within their sort of equivalent of our Ministry of Defense who are going to be very unhappy and probably will support Prigozhin in what he's doing. But what we're looking at is a military operation by Russians in Russia, which is incredibly difficult to stop. It's not like they're going through a foreign country where, Putin's forces can deploy considerable assets. I mean, Wagner have already claimed, it hasn't been actually, confirmed as yet, but they're claiming they've already taken down 3 helicopters, 1 cargo plane, so they even have the capability to deal with any kind of air defense which may be coming in, obviously, against them, any kind of fighters which might be used. But there's the collateral damage, Kev, which is what makes it so sort of concerning in many ways, because there are many members of the general public that they are coming alongside, and we're seeing a complete change for Putin in terms of the dynamics on Ukraine. And this could be ultimately what actually ends the Ukraine conflict.
That's what I was thinking. And now, Putin, we saw the speech. Usually his speeches are very scripted. They're very staged. He always comes over as an alpha male, calm, in control. Today, he sounded nervous, his voice was cracking, he was using extreme language about treason and being stabbed in the back. This is a cornered rat, is it not? He's worried right now. He is literally worried for his future, is he not?
Oh, God, completely. And I mean, in terms of obviously his position, he has to stay in the Kremlin. He can't evacuate, which I'm sure many oligarchs probably are doing right now. And when we have the mayor of Moscow declaring that any public events are now cancelled until the middle of July, and also telling members of, the Muscovites, those that actually live in Moscow, to get off the streets, to stay in their homes. This tells you how rapid, how quick this operation is running. And what is actually happening is in concerns of military personnel that are fundamentally mercenaries, private military who are incredibly capable, very well armed, and a boss who's very, very unhappy, who are charging now towards Moscow. I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, we've not seen anything like this, certainly anywhere in Russia or to this potential scale.
And we're hearing that the airports are packed. People who've got the money are just trying to get the hell out of Russia. I mean, it's not too much of an exaggeration, is it, Will, to say that Russia sort of is on the brink of a kind of civil war here?
It is. It's already in that sort of scope. And there's also, messages being sent out to the Russian military. And the Russian military who've been involved in the Ukraine conflict, we're looking at about 100,000 casualties, many of those fatalities. The Russian people are feeling somewhat opposed to the fact that this operation has been going on for 18 months. Not a lot of progress is being made. And certainly in terms of the propaganda, the ground that has been taken in Ukraine has been by the Wagner Group, and they've been extolled as, the primary force, the most capable military that are dealing with the Ukraine conflict. And now you've got a president who was saying and championing Wagner Group and saying, these guys are amazing. There are posters and big sort of billboards about, join Wagner Group that are being taken down right now. You have a president that's now saying these guys are committing treason. They are mutiny. This is a really serious problem.
Yeah, I mean, this is a full-scale military rebellion, is it not? Now, tell us a bit about Yevgeny Prigozhin. I mean, he's got a remarkable story. He's a former two-bit thief who went to jail just for common thievery. He did 9 years. He came out, started selling hot dogs with his family, set up a grocery business in St. Petersburg, moved into restaurants where he met Putin, became Putin's personal chef, ran Putin's favourite restaurant. Of course, Putin is a person of St. Petersburg, as is Prigozhin, but he's a very ruthless character. We've been looking at video of him screaming and shouting and demanding weapons and armory to help him and his men down in Bakhmut, near the Donbass in Ukraine. He's a frightening character.
Yeah, he is. But also, Kev, he's dealing with his troops in a really humane way and in a way that Putin hasn't. So, for example, if any of his troops have died through the process of the conflict, there is a lot of publicity behind him visiting the families of the deceased, giving them money, giving them cars, and really showing that he cares about his troops. So he's got this loyalty, this really sort of unquestionable loyalty by his troops. But also there are many of the regular conscripts within the Russian military who are thinking, we want to come over to those guys. So there could be huge desertion, not only by troops to potentially Wagner and supporting their aims, but those that may also desert and surrender to Ukraine, which is what is making this such a complex situation right now. But this charge to Moscow on this, highway M4, they're doing it so quickly and so rapidly. I think even by tonight, we will see some huge developments of what's happening.
And how do you think Putin will continue to react to this? As I say, he seemed very nervous, uncharacteristically nervous and faltering during this speech. It was almost as if the speech hadn't been written. He was talking off the hoof, but I think he felt his imperative was to talk to the Russian people in their hour of need. But as I keep saying, a rat is dangerous. A cornered rat can be lethal. Do you think he might resort to the nuclear button in his desperation?
I don't think so. I don't think he'd go that extreme, certainly not within his own country, on his own people. I mean, that would be the end of him if he did that. The M4 does have a number of bridges. It does have a number of rivers that it's got to cross. So there's every good chance that many of those bridges will be sabotaged or certainly blown up or obstructed in many ways to prevent, obviously, the movement by Wagner. But I think the problem is the propaganda war. I mean, usually the old saying of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Not in this case. And if Prigozhin gets in, he's actually a far worse potential prospect than Putin. I mean, I don't think Putin's going to go without a fight. But it's going to be interesting what happens in terms of the objective, which is the defense minister, who is the person that Prigozhin is so angry about.
Tell us about what you know about the Wagner Group, if you can, Will. I mean, they've got a reputation for being extremely ruthless. When they're in Africa, they're known to use rape as a weapon. They torture, they kill, they murder. They are utterly ruthless. Some of their leaders, I don't know about Prigozhin, but some of the leaders are known Nazi sympathisers. Some of them actually dress in SS uniform. They use SS tattoos. I mean, they're not a nice group of people, are they?
No, they're not, but they're also incredibly capable. I mean, where they've been operating, for example, is very much in Syria, in Africa, in a number of countries in Africa, particularly in Central Africa, but also Northern Africa, and also over in Venezuela. They have not been limited to a kind of a small playground, if you like, of where they've been able to actually undertake their operations. They have been financed. Prigozhin, I would say, is worth certainly quite a few billion himself. They've got a lot of money behind them. They're working with warlords to taking certain ground in countries which are currently politically or civilly unstable. They are a pretty merciless lot, but they're not just Russians. You've got individuals that come from Scandinavia, you've got Serbians, you've got an international fighting force of former military who've gone to join them. And they're looked after, they're paid well, which is something that they probably didn't have when they were in their regular unit or in their national army, for example. So, there's a lot of appeal for people to join them. And they first emerged really in 2014 when the annexation of Crimea was taking place. That's when they came and sort of appeared on the map. But they've been around for a long time.
I've had a lot of experts on, yourself included today, Will, and they're all saying that the next 48 hours are crucial. And they're also all saying that we're going to see extraordinary sea changes in the next 48 hours. Would you concur with that?
Yeah, I would concur with that. But what those are is really difficult to say. And I wouldn't want to speculate as to what possibly could be the outcome of this. And I think everybody's scratching their head as to what the Wagner Group's ultimate objective is. But if they get into if they get into Moscow, they get into the Kremlin, then this is a serious, serious message that's sent out to the rest of the world as to the fact that Putin does not have control of this situation. He has his own special forces unit that are in Moscow, are in the Kremlin, that can protect him, but they're up against a mighty force here. And it's really down to how many of the other forces, the regular forces, the Russian forces, they can conscript and get into their battalion and into their movement and their charge to Moscow. This, I think, 48 hours, I'd say less. I'd say 24 hours, Kev.
Blimey. And obviously, Washington, London, all the world leaders will be watching this situation extremely closely. How will we react? What will we do as we see potentially the Kremlin, Russia, unravel before our very eyes? Maybe, as you suggest, in the next 24 hours. What will the West do?
I don't think we're going to do a great deal. I think NATO is obviously going to firm itself up. I think Ukraine is going to firm itself up. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity for Zelensky and the Ukrainian forces to actually take back some of the ground, because I think we will see desertions from, the regular Russian army, either to the Ukraine side or, as I said, to Wagner, or just simply scattering. Wagner Group have taken the base of operations, which is outside the Ukraine, on Russian soil. They're controlling that now. So, there is very little resupply. One of the biggest problems that's kind of founded this whole issue is the fact that there has been minimal resupply. Prigozhin was talking certainly about the lack of ammunition and that his troops were dying. And that, if you look at some of his early statements, that was very much a driving force in the fact that he was not being supported by the Kremlin and by, obviously, the Russian military.
His rage, which was raw to behold, I mean, he's using the most forceful language, shall we say, in these videos, demanding weapons, shouting and screaming about his men dying. But what will he, in terms of Putin and this whole endeavour, what Prigozhin is moaning about is Kremlin incompetence. This entire invasion has been a disaster. What has gone wrong? Why has it been such a disaster, Will?
Well, I think a lot of it really comes down to, Kev, that there is an old guard in the military, within the Russian military, and there is a glass ceiling, and I think there are officers at suitably high levels that can't progress because of some of the old guard that has been kept in place. And they have an antiquated approach to military operations, but also to actually supporting those military operations. I mean, we have to remember that in a traditional sense, Wagner has been used as a proxy for Russia to operate in various parts of the world. They haven't sent their conventional troops anywhere, as far as I can recall, since Afghanistan, where they got an absolute beating, obviously, by, the Taliban and the Mujahideen. So in terms of Wagner, they have been pretty much their military force. And I think they, as a private entity that's been financed, they have been able to do what they can do without needing, obviously, to have progression through the ranks. But I think a lot of the regular troops are just fed up with the antiquated system and the fact that Putin has been in power for 2 decades. It's time for a change. And I think the general public in Russia, certainly those that I've spoken to, have said, look, we can't see a change ever happening. This could be the moment where that actually can happen.
Last question, Will. If Putin falls, is that the end of the Ukraine war?
Good question. My goodness, that's a really good question, Kev. I honestly don't know the answer on that. We have to see really what Prigozhin has as an objective. What is his strategy? Does he want to take over and depose Putin and take his role and become president, obviously, of the Russian Federation? I think we have to wait and see. It's a really difficult one to call, but I think certainly now is the time for Ukraine forces, the most advantageous moment to really reclaim much of the ground that's been taken before.